If you've ever lived near the Appalachian Mountains, then you understand. Out here, the stories aren't just passed down, they're etched into memory. I'm always curious, where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it where you are? Drop a comment and let me know. It's kind of amazing how many of us are spread out, sitting in silence, sharing the same eerie moment together. And if this story pulls you in, give it a like and subscribe. It helps others wander into these woods too, for better or worse. If someone tells you the Smokies are just fog and trees, they've never been off trail. I did a solo backpacking trip out there last fall, just 3 nights, nothing extreme. I wasn't trying to get lost. I was following the map, minding my business. But what I found, what I saw, shouldn't be there. And I'm telling this now because I need someone to believe me. I'm 32. I've been backpacking since I was a teenager. Appalachian Trail, Linville Gorge, Big South Fork, all of it. My name's Jason, and I live just outside Asheville. I work as a mechanic and spend my weekends hiking or working on my gear. That trip in October was supposed to be a reset. I'd broken up with my fiancée that summer, and I needed some silence, no phone, no news, no people. I chose the Smokies because it was familiar enough but still wild. I mapped a loop with decent elevation gain and a few remote ridgelines. My plan was to hike out from the Deep Creek trailhead, loop around into one of the less trafficked valleys, and come back around in 3 days. Weather was clear when I set off, low 60s, no storms in the forecast. I had a Garmin, a paper topo map, and my usual kit. Everything was smooth for the first day and a half. I saw some elk near the ridgeline, heard coyotes around 2 a.m., but nothing I hadn't experienced before. But around late afternoon on day 2, I took a wrong turn near a side trail. I still swear it wasn't on the map. The woods got denser, quieter. That's where it started, things I couldn't explain. Paths that didn't lead anywhere, a sudden cold in the air, and that feeling like someone was always just behind me. I dropped off the main trail unintentionally. The path I took wasn't overgrown. Someone had walked it recently. It looked carved even, worn smooth like an old farm road. I followed it thinking maybe it was a shortcut back to the loop. The woods were strangely silent. Not in the peaceful alpine way, but unnaturally still. No wind, no rustling, just the sound of my own boots and the occasional crack of twigs underfoot. About an hour in, I realized the trail wasn't connecting to anything on my map. I checked the GPS, no signal. That's normal in spots, but I started to feel this pressure in my chest, like the woods were watching me. It sounds paranoid, but there was something wrong about the way the trees grew. Too uniform. Spaced like rows. I turned around to backtrack, and that's when I saw it. My own boot prints, clearly visible in the dirt. But they weren't leading back the way I came. They curved left, into thicker forest. I hadn't walked that direction. I told myself maybe I'd misread the terrain, maybe I looped accidentally. So I followed the boot prints just to be sure. They led about 50 yards off the trail, to a clearing I swear hadn't been there before. In the center was a fire pit. Still warm. Someone had been here. There was no tent, no pack, but there were embers and a half-burned log. And next to it, this is what still messes with me, was a tin plate with old food scraps. Fresh. No bugs, no mold. Like it had been eaten from less than an hour ago. I called out, "Hello." Nothing. I waited, turning in slow circles, hoping for a response. I didn't like the idea of someone watching me from the trees. But nobody answered. I kept moving. Tried to get back on elevation, thinking if I could gain some height, maybe I'd see a ridgeline or catch signal. I hiked for another 30 minutes, not stopping once. That's when I saw the cabin. It was low to the ground, made of dark, almost blackened wood. No windows. No chimney. Just one crooked door. I didn't approach it. Something about it felt wrong, like it wasn't meant to be there. It wasn't old, not weathered like a pioneer cabin. It looked maintained, like someone still used it. Then I heard footsteps behind me, slow, heavy. I turned fast, heart hammering. Nothing. No one. Just trees. But the sound didn't stop. It moved around me like something circling just out of sight. I stood dead still, gripping the strap of my pack like it was a weapon. The footsteps stopped. A second later, I heard a whisper, clear as day, maybe 10 feet behind me. "You're not supposed to be here." I bolted. No shame in admitting it. I turned and ran, full pack, full speed, away from the cabin, away from that voice. Branches whipped my arms, thorns tore my pants, but I didn't care. I ran until my legs burned, until I couldn't hear the footsteps anymore. When I finally stopped, it was dark. No signal. I checked my compass. It spun like it was broken. My Garmin was frozen on the same screen. I didn't even know which direction I'd come from anymore. I forced myself to calm down. Set up camp right there. Just a tarp and bivy sack, no fire. I wanted to be invisible. I barely slept. Every 20 minutes I woke up, heart racing, convinced someone was just outside the tarp. But there was nothing, no movement, no sound. Just that suffocating stillness again. Sometime after 3 a.m., I heard the sound of something being dragged through the brush. Not an animal. It was heavy. Metal on wood? A shovel? A chain? It moved slowly past me, never stopped, never got closer. Just passed. I stayed silent, curled up in my bivvy like a corpse. I don't think I even breathed. When dawn came, I didn't pack up. I just left everything and started walking. But here's the worst part. I hiked for hours. And I passed that same clearing. Fire pit. Tin plate. Still warm. Still no one there. I kept walking. No trails. Just woods that seemed to shift. Every time I thought I recognized a tree or a log I'd passed before, it would be different. Tilted the wrong way. Moss on the wrong side. Like the forest was rearranging itself. Mocking me. Eventually I found the trail. Real trail. Gravel base, worn edges, marked with a blue blaze. I almost cried when I saw it. I followed it out for 6 miles until I hit a ranger station. They asked me where I'd come from. I told them Deep Creek, then I paused and said I wasn't sure. I asked if anyone had reported a missing hiker or strange cabins recently. The ranger gave me a weird look and said, "There aren't any cabins in that sector. Hasn't been for decades. You must have been somewhere else." I went back a week later with 2 friends. Both experienced hikers. We brought better GPS, marked everything, stayed on trails. Tried to retrace my steps exactly. We never found the offshoot trail. Never found the clearing. No cabin. Nothing. But here's the kicker, we did find something. A tree about a half-mile off the trail. Carved deep into the bark were 2 words. Stay out. Fresh. No moss, no rot. Like it had been carved just days ago. My friend Nick tried to laugh it off, said it was probably a joke from a local. But the other guy, Paul, he didn't say much. Just stared at it for a long time. Finally, he asked, "You hear anything out here that night? Voices, maybe?" I nodded. He didn't ask anything else. I haven't been back since. I still hike, but not in the Smokies. Not after dark, and never alone. I still think about that voice. The fire pit. That cabin with no windows. What would have happened if I'd opened that door? I don't think the Smokies are haunted. I don't even think it's supernatural. I think it's worse than that. I think there are things out there, people maybe, who don't want to be found. And if you do find them, they make sure you don't come back the same. So if you're planning a solo trip through the Smoky Mountains, just do me one favor. Stick to the trail. And if you see a cabin with no windows, don't go near it. Not everyone gets out. I should have turned around when the GPS froze and the road signs stopped making sense. But I was low on gas, 2 hours from the nearest highway, and that crooked little sign that read, "Welcome to Grafton Hollow," felt like a lifeline. There was no cell signal, no people on the streets, just old buildings leaning like they'd been left too long in the rain. I only meant to stop for fuel. Instead, I walked into something that didn't want to be found. Back in the fall of 2020, I was driving from Louisville to Asheville to meet a friend I hadn't seen in years. I decided to take the scenic route, some dumb mix of nostalgia and wanting to unplug. I followed back roads through the edge of the Appalachians, letting the ridges and fading foliage take over the drive. No music, no podcasts, just quiet. I figured if I got tired, I'd pull off at a gas station or diner somewhere rural. I've done plenty of solo drives like that. This one felt no different, at first. By early evening, a storm started rolling in. The clouds dropped low, thick and silver, swallowing the sun before it fully set. That's when I noticed the gas light. I had about 20 miles of fuel left and no stations in sight. I passed a rusted sign that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Grafton Hollow, 3 miles. The lettering was uneven, the bottom half smeared with moss. I turned off onto the narrow road anyway, telling myself it was just a sleepy mountain town. Maybe it was once, but what I drove into wasn't asleep, it was watching. The road twisted uphill, tighter and darker the deeper I went. Trees hung low, branches forming a canopy that blocked out most of the remaining daylight. When I finally crested the ridge and saw the first row of buildings, I felt an odd sense of relief. Grafton Hollow looked like a postcard from the 1950s that someone had left out in the rain. Weathered facades, chipped paint, empty porches. The air felt thick, still. No wind, no birdsong. There was a gas pump near the corner of an old general store. Manual, coin-fed, like something out of a history museum. I parked and got out. The town was dead silent. No engines, no footsteps, not even a door creak. I looked through the store window. Shelves were stocked but dusty. A register sat on the counter, like someone had just stepped away. I knocked on the glass. No answer. Then I noticed something on the door frame, small etchings carved into the wood. Dozens of them. Tally marks, names, dates. Some fresh, some almost worn smooth. I stepped back and scanned the other buildings. Same markings beneath windows, around doors, even carved into telephone poles. All recent, and all different names. A man stepped out from behind the gas station. Middle-aged. Plaid shirt tucked too neatly, hands folded in front of him like a preacher before service. He didn't look surprised to see me. "Lost are ya?" he asked. "Low on gas." "Just looking to fill up," I replied. He nodded slowly. "Ain't no fuel here no more. Been out for years." "But the pump?" "Still here, yeah. But it's hollow, like the rest of the town." I didn't know how to respond. His tone wasn't threatening, but something about the way he looked at me, like he was cataloging me, set my nerves on edge. I asked if there was another station nearby. He didn't answer. Just looked at my car, then back at me. "You should stay in town tonight. Road gets rough after dark. Folks don't do well driving it blind." A woman appeared on a porch 2 doors down, then a child near the chapel steps. Silent, staring. I thanked him and backed toward my car. It was then I realized I hadn't heard my engine running. I got in, turned the key. Nothing. I tried again. Just clicks. I popped the hood and checked connections. Everything looked fine. Battery was only a year old. When I stood up again, 3 people were now watching. The man in plaid, the woman, and a younger man leaning against the lamppost with his arms crossed, face unreadable. I tried calling out, "Is there a mechanic here?" The woman finally spoke. "Town's closed, Han has been." I asked if they had a phone. The younger man shook his head. "No signal here. Closest line's 20 miles south. Road's out right now anyway." I looked back toward the ridge I'd come from. The trees now looked closer, like the road had narrowed behind me. Something wasn't right. These people weren't trying to help. They weren't even curious. They were waiting. I walked back to my car slowly, not wanting to trigger anything. I opened the trunk and quietly grabbed the tire iron. If I had to walk out, I wasn't doing it defenseless. When I looked up, more townsfolk had gathered, maybe a dozen, lining the street, watching silently like I was the next part of some routine. I took the side alley behind the chapel, trying to avoid their eyes. The gravel crunched louder than I expected. I ducked behind a shed, caught my breath. My chest was tight, hands shaking. That's when I saw the sign. It was a wooden board nailed to the back of the chapel. Names again. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. But this time, some of them were circled in red. And next to each circled name, a date. None of the dates were more than 5 years old. My heart dropped. I scanned for anything familiar, and there it was. Hudson Weller, October 2020, circled. My name. My exact name. My birthday scribbled below it in faded pen. I staggered back. My legs felt numb. I hadn't told anyone I was coming this way. No social media posts. I hadn't even used a card since breakfast in Knoxville. No one should have known. But someone had written it. Days ago, maybe longer. I heard footsteps on the gravel close. I ran. I tore down a back trail past the graveyard, boots slipping in wet leaves, heart slamming. Behind me, I heard the soft crunch of footsteps keeping pace, not running, not calling out. Just following. Branches cut across my arms and face. I didn't care. I followed the slope, hoping it'd lead me out. Hoping I'd find the ridge road again. But the forest didn't look the same. And then I saw it. My car, sitting at the bottom of the hill. In the opposite direction from where I'd entered town. It shouldn't have been there. The car door was open. My keys were inside. I didn't question it. I got in, turned the ignition. This time it started. I didn't look back. I drove, tires spinning through mud, bouncing over tree roots. The road was rough but passable. Somehow I was back on the same stretch of Route 129 I'd entered from. No sign of the broken road. No storm. Just a blank gray sky overhead. When I finally got to Asheville, I went straight to a gas station and looked up Grafton Hollow. Nothing. No record. No zip code. No township by that name registered in Tennessee or North Carolina. I tried searching again a few days later. Nothing. I asked a ranger I met outside Roan Mountain if he'd heard of it. He paused for a beat too long, then said, "You see tally marks anywhere?" I nodded slowly. "Then you got lucky," he said. "Others don't come back. I've never taken the scenic route again. I don't travel without paper maps now, and I always fill up before I get below half a tank. There are places in those hills that exist without existing, towns that shouldn't be there, roads that loop when you're not paying attention. Places that choose when to show themselves. And if one ever does appear in front of you, quiet, crooked, watching, keep driving. Don't stop. Don't ask questions. Don't ever enter." If you ever think about hiking deep into the Appalachian backwoods alone, don't. I thought I was prepared. I had the gear, the map, the route marked out with mile precision. What I wasn't ready for was the silence, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that feels aware. Somewhere past day 2, something changed in the woods, and I swear I wasn't the only one out there anymore. I'm a trail runner and survivalist by habit. Every few months I carve out time for a solo trip. No signal, no people, just a pack, a compass, and the sound of my own breathing. It's not about escaping society as much as resetting my mind. In September of 2022, I set out for a 4-day loop starting in the Cherokee National Forest, winding into one of the lesser-used ridgelines along the Tennessee-North Carolina border. I had topo maps, extra water, and emergency flare kits. My plan was simple: start at Flat Gap Trailhead, camp near Cold Spring Shelter, loop back through Sugar Mountain Pass. Day 1 was smooth. Weather was dry, sun low but steady. I passed one group of hikers heading the opposite direction, exchanged a few nods, and moved on. By early evening I set up camp, made a small fire, and cooked ramen under a sky full of stars. It was calm, the kind of calm that tricks you into thinking the forest is friendly. I fell asleep to the chirp of crickets and the occasional distant owl. But by morning, something in the air felt different. It started with small things. I woke up to find the firewood I'd stacked moved about 10 feet from camp, half of it broken into smaller pieces, the other half arranged in a neat line. I thought maybe an animal had dragged it or I sleepwalked, though I've never done that in my life. I brushed it off, packed up, and hit the trail again. The woods started to close in faster than they should have. The path, which had been clear on my map, looked less worn than expected. I marked trees with chalk as I went, just in case. Around midday, I noticed something weird. Every so often, I'd see a mark already scratched into the bark. Not trail blazes, those I recognize, but deep, uneven gouges about chest height. Fresh. Sap still oozing in places. Like someone or something had scraped it with a blade or claw. I hiked another 3 miles and stopped to eat. No sounds. No birds. No wind. Even the bugs seemed to avoid the area. It wasn't natural. I clapped my hands, shouted once just to hear something familiar. My voice felt swallowed. The air was heavy, like I'd dropped into a different altitude zone without realizing it. Then I found the shoe. It was wedged between two rocks off the trail, mud-caked, faded red, clearly not fresh. I picked it up. Dried blood on the toe. I dropped it. Looked around. No bag, no other belongings. Just that one, torn-up sneaker, sitting like a forgotten warning. I pushed harder through the trail, telling myself I'd make it to Cold Spring Shelter by nightfall and reassess. My legs were sore. I drank more water than usual. The deeper I went, the more wrong everything felt. At one point, I heard twigs crack behind me, but every time I turned around, nothing. Not even squirrels. Just trees. Watching. I passed another camp. Or what was left of one. Tarp shredded. Sleeping bag slashed and hung from a branch like someone was drying it. No pack, no ID. Just ashes from a long-dead fire and an empty can of beans stabbed through the middle, rusted but not ancient. That's when I heard the whistling. It was soft, uneven, a tune I didn't recognize, coming from up trail. I froze. My instinct said hide, but I couldn't tell from which direction it was really coming. It bounced between trees, echoing wrong. I waited 5 minutes, then 10. The sound never got closer, never faded, just hovered. I slowly moved off trail and waited in the brush. No one passed. No one whistled again. When I finally made it to Cold Spring, the shelter was empty, and I mean stripped. No logs for seating. No fire pit. Just black scorch marks across the stone floor and clawed-up scratches along the wooden beams. Something had happened there. Something angry. I didn't sleep that night. I left at first light. Or what I thought was first light. The sky was so gray and heavy, it could have been 4 a.m. or noon. I retraced my route south toward Sugar Mountain, desperate to hit the ridgeline and make my way back to Flat Gap. My compass needle spun once before settling, something it had never done before. 3 hours in, I saw movement in the distance, off trail, deep between the trees. It was a man, I think. Tall, wearing what looked like a ranger coat, but he wasn't moving right. His arms hung too low. His head tilted unnaturally to one side. I called out. He didn't turn. He stepped behind a tree, and never came out the other side. I should have run, but my legs didn't want to obey. I forced them into a jog, then a full sprint. I kept running until I hit a clearing and slammed straight into a barbed wire fence that wasn't on my map. I panicked. Cut my arm bad. Blood soaked through my sleeve. I backed up and looked around and froze. On the other side of the clearing, maybe 200 feet away, were 3 figures. One was the ranger. The other 2 were smaller. All motionless. All watching. They weren't blurry, but somehow they didn't fit. Like they were part of a different layer pasted over the woods. Unblinking. The middle one raised its arm, slowly, and pointed at me. I turned and ran blindly, ripping through branches, not caring about direction. I didn't stop until I tripped over a ridge and landed flat against the base of a tree. I stayed there, shaking, listening. They never followed. I stumbled onto an old fire road later that day, one that led me to a hunting cabin about 6 miles out from the nearest ranger station. The guy who found me said I looked like I hadn't slept in a week. He gave me water, cleaned my cuts, and let me call for help. When I told the ranger what happened, he didn't laugh. He didn't act surprised. He just asked one question. "Did you mark your trail?" I nodded. He said, "That's the only reason you're here." I pressed him. Asked what the hell I saw out there. He wouldn't answer. Said, "Some places don't want people. They get used to being left alone." I tried to find the same trail again the following year. Same maps, same start point. Flat Gap trailhead was there, but the offshoot to Cold Spring was gone. Overgrown. No markers. No gouged trees. Like the forest swallowed the whole thing after I left. Now I don't hike alone. I don't trust topo maps entirely. And I don't ever ignore the silence. Because once you hear something moving in that silence, once you realize it's listening back, you're not just hiking anymore. You're surviving. And if you're lucky, just maybe, you'll make it out. There are places in the woods that don't want to be found, and some that seem to find you. I thought I was just taking a detour. A 2-day solo hike through Virginia's Highland trails, nothing extreme. But halfway through day 1, I wandered off course and ended up somewhere that wasn't on any map. A forgotten clearing with rusted tin roofs, collapsed shacks, and something else. Something that made me wish I'd never gone off trail. I'm a photographer, mostly landscapes. Not a pro, but serious enough to carry a DSLR and a drone on every trip. In April 2023, I planned a weekend hike through a quiet section of the Jefferson National Forest, about 18 miles of trail loop near Mountain Lake. I'd been up there before with friends, but this time I went alone. The goal was to get some moody fog shots and enjoy the quiet. Weather was mild, forecast was clear. I left early Friday, planning to camp overnight, then finish the loop and be back in town by Saturday evening. Things started off perfect. Birds, sun, trickling streams, exactly what I needed after a brutal month at work. I took a detour around mid-morning to follow an old deer trail that veered off the main path, hoping it would lead to a good ridgeline view. My GPS still tracked fine, and I marked the split with tape on a branch. I figured I'd loop back in a mile or two. But that trail twisted deeper than I expected, and before I realized how far I'd gone, the signal dropped. That's when I saw the rooftops through the trees, corrugated metal, rusted red, tucked low in a hollow where no buildings should have been. I hesitated for a second. It's not every day you stumble on a ghost town. Curiosity won out. I made my way down the slope, boots slipping on damp moss, branches snapping underfoot. The closer I got, the quieter everything became. No wind. No birds. Even my own steps felt muted. The camp had maybe 6 structures, all wood and tin, all crumbling. One was clearly an old mess hall. Long tables, rusted pans, broken dishes. Another looked like a bunkhouse, rows of iron bed frames, shredded blankets, boots still lined against the wall like the men who wore them had just stepped out. Tools were scattered in the dirt. Picks, lanterns, even a broken helmet with a name scratched on the inside. S. Rucker. I took out my camera and snapped a few shots. That's when I noticed something odd. There were no signs of rot. The place looked abandoned, but the decay wasn't right. Wood splintered, but not moldy. Footprints visible in the dirt floor of one shack. And not just old ones, fresh. I squatted down to check. The prints weren't mine. They pointed in a straight line from one end of the bunkhouse to the other, and then just stopped. I stood there uneasy. That's when I heard the drag. A soft, low sound, like a rope pulled across gravel, coming from the far end of the camp. I called out, "Hello? Anyone out there?" No answer. The dragging stopped. I backed out of the bunkhouse and moved to the next structure, a supply shed. It was half collapsed, roof sunken inward. Inside were dozens of empty crates and a stack of ledgers covered in black dust. I opened one. The last dated entry was from 1971. It said, "Last shift never returned. We'll go looking in the morning." They heard something below. The page after that had been torn out. I turned to leave and saw something that made me freeze. Carved into the back wall of the shed, nearly 4 feet across, was a message. We weren't alone down there. My stomach dropped. I took a shaky step back and kicked something metal. It rolled into the sunlight. It was an old canteen. Dented, covered in grime. But the name on it was burned in clear. Hudson Weller. My name. Exact spelling. Same middle initial. No one in my family ever worked mining jobs. No one I knew had that name. But there it was, right in front of me. I picked it up, hand trembling. The lid was loose. Inside was a small, folded photograph, faded, grainy, like it had sat in there for decades. It was a group of miners, maybe 7 men, and dead center in the photo, someone who looked just like me. Same jawline, same crooked nose, even the same watch I was wearing. I dropped the photo and bolted out of the shack. I didn't stop running until I was halfway back up the slope. I didn't care about the trail or my gear. I just needed out. But the path didn't look right. The trees felt too close. I scanned for the tape I'd tied to mark the fork. Gone. I turned in circles, trying to reorient. That's when I heard the whistling. Low. Off key. Coming from below. It rose slowly, like someone wandering the camp again, tracing the same steps I just ran from. I ducked behind a tree and held my breath. The whistling stopped. Then came the crunch of footsteps, slow, methodical. But I couldn't see anyone. Just the rustle of brush moving as if someone, or something, was pacing just behind the tree-line. I moved further uphill, crouched low, trying not to snap any twigs. That's when I saw movement near one of the collapsed sheds. A figure, dressed like a miner, back turned. He moved awkwardly. His arms hung low, stiff, like they weren't connected right. He took one step, then another, and then snapped to a stop, head rotating far too fast in my direction. I ducked. Did he see me? I didn't wait to find out. I sprinted uphill, lungs burning, legs barely catching traction on the slick earth. I felt that strange pull, like the woods wanted to hold me there, like I was supposed to stay. I didn't stop until the shadows thinned, and I heard wind again. Real wind. Birds. A distant woodpecker. I burst through the underbrush back onto the marked trail. And behind me, the forest was still. I didn't sleep that night. I pitched my tent in a small clearing half a mile from the main loop, too afraid to go further in the dark. I kept the drone light on, just in case. I watched the trees. Listened. Nothing followed. In the morning, I hiked out in silence. Once I had service again, I searched everything I could. Old mining sites. Abandoned camps. No mention of anything fitting what I saw. Not in public records, not on satellite maps, not even on hiker forums. I posted anonymously asking about shacks or old settlements near Mountain Lake. A few replies joked about coal ghosts. One said, "If you found it, don't go back. They don't want you leaving twice." I never told anyone the full story. Not until now. I still have the canteen. I locked it in a box under my bed. I tried to throw it away once, but something stopped me. Some part of me needs to remember it was real. The photo? Gone. I kept it in my coat pocket, but when I got home, it wasn't there. I tore apart the bag, checked every compartment. Nothing. Like it vanished with the rest of the place. But I still see that man sometimes, in dreams, in reflections, in the mirror when I'm too tired. The one who looked like me. The one standing with men who never walked back above ground. He's always smiling. If you're ever out in those woods and see rusted rooftops where there shouldn't be any, don't go closer. Whatever's buried under that camp doesn't stay still. And once it knows you, you're never hiking alone again. There's a fire tower deep in the Appalachian backwoods that's not marked on any current map. It rises above the tree line like a skeleton, tall, rusted, forgotten. I found it during a solo hike last October, after taking a wrong turn on a trail that didn't exist 2 days before. I thought it'd be a cool place to rest and maybe snap a few shots. Instead, I ended up locked inside with someone, or something, that should have stayed buried with the tower itself. I hike alone a lot. Call it therapy, call it escape, but it's the one place where I can breathe without checking my phone every 10 seconds. I'd planned a long weekend loop through the Pisgah National Forest, about 24 miles round trip, mostly along known trails with designated shelters. Weather was crisp, mid-50s, just cold enough to keep the crowds away but warm enough for a sleeping bag and tent. I was 2 days in, about 16 miles deep, when things went off track, literally. My GPS glitched somewhere near Graybeard Ridge. It wasn't the first time. These mountains have dead zones. I tried to cut across a lesser-used connector trail I remembered from an old forestry map, hoping to save time and loop back toward camp by dusk. But after an hour, the path narrowed, twisted uphill, and eventually vanished into overgrown brush. That's when I saw the tower rising through the canopy, dead center on the ridge, maybe half a mile away. It looked intact. My legs were tired, and I figured it'd be a solid lookout or shelter. What I found there wasn't built for comfort. I reached the base just before the light started to fade. The metal was rusted, steps creaking under each footfall, but still solid enough. The tower had to be at least 60 feet tall. As I climbed, the forest below sank into shadows, the blue ridge stretching forever into haze. At the top was a standard observation cabin, windows on all four sides, a narrow catwalk around the perimeter, and a door hanging slightly ajar. No locks, no lights. Inside, the place was empty but weirdly clean. Dusty, sure, but no graffiti, no trash, no signs of animal nests. There was a desk bolted to the center, a rusted metal chair, and an old logbook left open, pages curled from moisture. The latest entry caught my eye. Dated October 4th, 1978. It read, "He's back. Pacing the base. Knocked 3 times last night. Not sure how he got this far up. Still no response from base. May have to wait him out again." I flipped the page. The handwriting was shaky now. "Don't go down. I saw what he does to the animals." Then nothing. My skin prickled. I scanned the cabin for radios or gear. Nothing. Just old maps pinned to the walls and a pair of cracked binoculars. I stepped outside onto the catwalk. Wind tugged at my jacket, but there was no one below. Just the tree canopy, still and endless. That's when I heard it. Clang. A sharp metallic sound from the bottom of the stairs. I stepped back into the cabin, heart pounding. Looked out the front window. Nothing. But then clang. 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 Like boots on the ladder. Heavy. One step at a time. I froze. Didn't move. Tried to rationalize it. Wind. Wildlife. Another hiker? But I hadn't seen another person in 2 days. I crouched low and peeked through the gap in the floor grating. The staircase was narrow, twisting, so I could only see bits of it, but a shadow moved across the landing. And then it stopped. I waited. 1 minute. Then 5. Silence. No more clanging. I grabbed my multi-tool and wedged it under the door latch. Not much, but better than nothing. I turned off my headlamp, sat in the corner, and listened. Around 11 p.m., I heard the knocking. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the outside wall of the cabin. Not at the door. Just the wall. Then it circled. Knocked again. On the opposite side. I followed the sound, trying to catch a glimpse out the windows. But there was no one there. Just black trees and moonlit mist. The knocking stopped at the front window. I inched closer, pressed my face to the glass, and saw nothing. Not the catwalk. Not the railing. Just blackness, like something was standing in front of the window but casting no reflection. Blocking everything. I stumbled back, breath caught in my throat. Then silence again. I must have passed out for a while, curled in the corner like a scared animal. I woke up just before dawn, pale light spilling through the windows. The air was wrong. Still stale heavy. I stepped onto the catwalk to clear my head. Below me the forest was quiet. Too quiet. No wind, no birds. Then I saw it. On the base of the tower, something had been carved into the soil. Large, deep letters. Stay. I stared at it. My pulse spiked. I looked around, half expecting someone to emerge from the brush. No one. I turned to head back inside, and noticed the door had closed. I hadn't touched it. When I grabbed the handle, it didn't budge. I slammed it with my shoulder. Still locked. From the inside. Then I heard the creaking. Footsteps. On the stairs. Clang. Pause. Clang. Pause. Coming up again, same as the night before, but slower this time. I backed to the edge of the catwalk, fists clenched, eyes darting for anything I could use. But as the footsteps neared, they stopped, just before reaching the top. I waited, held my breath, tried not to move. Then a hand reached up over the floor grating. Pale, mud-caked, human. It gripped the metal, too tightly, and just held. I couldn't scream. I couldn't run. The hand stayed there for 30 seconds, then slowly slipped back out of view. I didn't check if it left. I climbed onto the railing and dropped 15 feet into the trees, tearing my leg on a branch. I didn't stop running until I saw trail markers again. I reached a ranger station that afternoon, muddy, bleeding, limping. The ranger patched me up, asked what happened. I gave him a vague story, lost, hurt, maybe hallucinating. But he looked at me strangely when I mentioned the fire tower. He said there used to be one up near Graybeard Ridge. Built in the 1950s, condemned in the late 70s after a man disappeared during a thunderstorm. People said he went nuts, the ranger told me. Locked himself inside. Radioed for help but wouldn't come down. They found claw marks on the inside of the windows. I asked if the tower had been torn down. He shook his head. Supposedly. But folks still claim they see it sometimes. Just appears. I went home and looked at the photos I'd taken. All of them were intact, except the tower shots. Every photo of the tower was corrupted. Blurred. Like static. Like something interfered. And the logbook? Gone from my pack. I swear I packed it. Swear I wrapped it in my jacket. But when I unzipped my gear at home, it was just gone. I don't hike off trail anymore. I don't follow old forestry roads or check out cool abandoned sites. And if you're ever deep in the Appalachians and see a tower rising where there shouldn't be one, don't climb it. Don't go inside. Don't look down. Because whatever stayed behind in that cabin isn't human. And it remembers footsteps. Especially yours. This happened in late October of last year, somewhere near the Tennessee-North Carolina border. I was driving solo, hauling a trailer of heating supplies up toward Asheville from Chattanooga. I've been doing these mountain routes for about 6 years now, long nights, bad cell service, and twisty roads that don't forgive. I usually avoid rest stops unless I absolutely have to. But that night, I'd misjudged my brakes and overestimated my energy. When the eyelids started drifting at the wheel, I pulled off at the next rest area I saw. It wasn't anything fancy, just a faded blue rest area sign with a single arrow pointing toward a curved drive. The building was squat and stone-faced, nestled right into the tree line. I figured I'd use the bathroom, maybe nap for a bit. It was cold enough outside to keep the windows fogged up, and quiet enough that I could hear the trees shifting when the wind hit. It felt like one of those places built before GPS existed, when maps and mile markers mattered. I wish now I'd kept on driving. The moment I stepped out of the truck, I felt it. That weird static in the air. No insects. No birds. Just the wind through dry leaves and the faint hum of the building's outdoor lights. The parking lot was mostly empty. Just my rig and an old beige minivan parked a few spots away. No plates. Looked like it hadn't moved in a while. There was mud crusted over the wheels and a trash bag tucked under the back bumper. I remember thinking someone was probably living out of it. I walked toward the building. The motion sensor light above the entrance blinked to life with a lag, flickering a bit before holding steady. The inside was warmer than I expected. A dull heater hummed from a vent above the door. The whole place had that government-issue feel. Green-tiled floor, faded vending machines, a pamphlet rack with warped brochures no one had touched in years. There were 2 restrooms, one marked men, the other sealed off with yellow tape and a handwritten sign that said closed maint. The men's door creaked when I pushed it. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and water slowly dripped from a faucet. One stall door was closed. I chose the urinal, finished, and went to wash my hands. That's when I noticed it. The closed stall door had shoes underneath, brown boots pointed outward. At first, I figured someone was just using it, but the boots didn't move. I dried my hands and tried not to stare, but after 30 seconds of silence, I cleared my throat and said, "Hey, you good in there?" Nothing. Not even a shift. I turned off the sink. Dead silence. I waited another 10 seconds, then left the bathroom. As I stepped into the lobby, I noticed something else. The vending machines were stocked, brand new chips, candy, and drinks. But every single product inside was a version that had been discontinued years ago. Old-style Lay's bags with the 2007 logo. Coke bottles with metal caps. I stared at them, confused. Some were sun-bleached, as if they'd been in there since the early 2000s. And then the sound. From the hallway leading toward the exit. Footsteps. Slow, dragging footsteps. Rubber soles over linoleum. I turned. No one was there. Just the faint outline of the floor cleaner's trail glimmering under the ceiling lights, snaking toward the end of the corridor. But no person in sight. I figured maybe there was a janitor or night staff, though I hadn't seen any vehicles outside besides the van. I followed the sound down the hallway. It led to a janitor's closet and a utility exit. Both were closed. The footsteps stopped once I reached the end. I pushed lightly on the utility door. Locked. Then I heard it again, this time from behind me. The bathroom. Only now, it was the sound of a stall door slamming shut. I froze. I hadn't heard the stall open. I hadn't heard footsteps leave. But something inside had moved. I walked back as quietly as I could. The men's room door creaked again as I pushed it open. The air inside was colder now, like someone had opened a window even though there were none. The boots were gone. The stall door was wide open. And sitting on the floor, just inside the stall, was a small object, an old cassette tape. The kind you'd find in a Walkman back in the 90s. No label. Just dust and a smudge of something red on the side. I didn't touch it. I backed out of the room, heart thudding now. Back in the lobby, the vending machine lights started flickering. The one with the chips buzzed and then popped, its display shorting out completely. I turned to leave, and that's when I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The minivan outside? It was gone. I hadn't heard an engine. No headlights. But the space it had been in was empty. That's when I made the dumb decision to go back to my truck and get my flashlight. The fog had thickened in the time I was inside. Everything was drenched in a silver sheen, and visibility had dropped to maybe 30 feet. I climbed back into my cab, shut the door, and sat for a second. I told myself I was overreacting, that someone was squatting in the building or the van and just didn't want to be found. But then I saw it. Through my fogged windshield, a silhouette standing just at the tree line. At first I thought it was a deer or something, but the shape was wrong. It was upright, human-shaped, still, way too still. I grabbed my flashlight, stepped out of the cab, and pointed it toward the woods. The beam caught something, a man's face, pale and expressionless, peeking from behind a tree. Only the eyes were wrong. They weren't looking at me. They were rolled slightly upward, like he was looking through me or past me. His mouth was slightly open. No movement. Not even a blink. "Hey!" I shouted. No response. I took one step forward, and the man, if that's what it was, stepped backward into the trees, like a puppet being pulled by a string. No shuffle, no bend of the knees. Just gliding. Vanishing. I ran. Back inside the building. I shut the door and tried to call 911. No signal. Not a bar. And then every single light in the rest stop shut off at once. Total black. I heard the automatic door hiss behind me. I spun. There was someone inside now. Not footsteps. Breathing. Just a few feet behind me. Wet, raspy dragging. I didn't wait. I ran into the men's room, slammed the door shut, and locked it. I huddled in the corner, flashlight off. My ears picked up the breathing getting closer, and then nothing. Silence. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Then, the sound of the front doors opening, and footsteps running away. When I finally worked up the nerve to come out, it was almost 1 a.m. The lights had come back on. The vending machines buzzed as if nothing had happened. But the cassette tape was gone. So was the smell in the bathroom. And the air was warm again. I went to my truck and found it had been unlocked, even though I knew I'd locked it. Nothing was stolen. Nothing disturbed except my glove box. Someone had opened it, pulled out my emergency folder with my route papers and maps, and left them neatly spread out on the passenger seat. I drove off immediately, pushing 80 down those curving mountain roads just to put distance between me and that rest stop. No other vehicles. No cops. No cell signal until I was nearly out of the mountain pass. The next day, I tried to look up the rest stop's name. Nothing. Not on Google Maps. Not on the Tennessee or North Carolina Department of Transportation sites. I called a buddy who's been running these routes since the 90s. Told him what I saw. He paused and asked me what the sign looked like. I described it, blue, fading, with a cracked arrow pointing toward the hill. He got quiet. Then he told me, that stop burned down in 2003. Lightning strike hit a gas line. They shut it down for good. I told him I'd been there just last night. He said, that's not possible. I haven't gone near that route since. I rerouted all my jobs away from that side of the mountains. I don't care if it adds 2 hours to my trip. Because if that stop is still there, still sitting empty in the woods, then someone's keeping it open. And whatever I ran into, it wasn't trying to scare me. It was trying to learn me. And it almost did. It was supposed to be a quick detour, just a dirt road leading to a ranger station I'd never seen before. I followed the signs thinking maybe I could get directions or borrow a map. But the deeper I drove, the quieter it got, until all I could hear was the gravel under my tires and the hiss of wind through the trees. The building looked abandoned, but someone was inside. And when I finally understood what I was looking at, it was already too late. I used to work delivery routes for a wilderness outfitter based in Roanoke, Virginia. Every week, we'd send bulk orders of gear, fuel, and packaged food to ranger stations and hiking supply points all through the Appalachian region. I drove alone, preferred it that way, just me, the truck, and back roads that looked like they hadn't seen asphalt since the 60s. Most of my stops were quick drop-offs. Leave the gear, sign a form, keep it moving. This particular trip happened around mid-November, cold enough that frost lingered through midday, and the trees were mostly bare. I was supposed to deliver a small load to a ranger station off Route 220. I'd been there before, easy spot to find. But about an hour into the trip, I saw a wooden sign I'd never noticed before. It was aged and carved by hand, with chipping white letters that read Station 8, Staffed. An arrow pointed to a gravel road veering right, deeper into the forest. I figured it might be a newer outpost or something I'd missed on my previous routes. My GPS had no data out there, and I didn't have service, so I figured, hell, why not check it out? Maybe they needed supplies too. The gravel road narrowed after about 10 minutes, with thick pine trunks boxing me in from both sides. No signage, no mile markers. Just that suffocating hush you get in the deep woods. I slowed down, leaning forward, scanning for anything resembling a station. After a few bends, I finally saw it, tucked into a clearing just ahead. The building was small and old. The kind of forest structure that was probably built back in the 40s. Brown timber siding, forest green trim, one dim porch light flickering under a mossy overhang. No vehicles in sight, no smoke from the chimney. I pulled up and cut the engine. I stepped out and immediately felt the air change. It was colder here, like 5 degrees colder. I zipped up my jacket and walked toward the door, which was slightly ajar. That gave me pause. Stations are supposed to be locked when not in use. I called out, hello? Anybody here? No answer. I pushed the door open with my foot. It creaked like an old coffin lid. Inside, the air smelled like cedar and something else, something stale. The front room was empty but neat. A desk, a wall map, a logbook open with a pen resting across the pages. There was a pot of coffee on the warmer, though it looked like it had been sitting there for hours, burnt black at the bottom. I called out again, louder this time. Forest Services? Delivery guy here. Still nothing. I looked around a little. The walls were lined with filing cabinets and faded posters. Fire warnings, wildlife alerts, missing hiker bulletins. One caught my eye. It wasn't printed like the others. It was handwritten in pencil on yellow paper. The headline read, "Do not go to Station 8, reroute all traffic." I froze. The sign outside had clearly labeled this as Station 8. But this flyer said to avoid it. It was dated 6 months ago. That's when I noticed the logbook on the desk again. I leaned over and read the last entry. November 6th, heard movement around 1:12 a.m. No sign of anyone. Barricaded the door. Leaving note if anything happens. This station shouldn't be active. The others know that. I'm not staying another night. The date was 8 days ago. I turned around, ready to leave, when I noticed something odd through the back window. A faint light flickering in the trees. Like a lantern swaying back and forth. Just one light, far from the building, deeper in the woods. Then it stopped moving. I don't know why I felt so drawn to it. Maybe I thought someone was stranded out there. Or maybe I just didn't want to believe the growing tension in my gut. I grabbed the flashlight from my truck and walked toward the woods. Every step into those trees made the air denser, like I was wading into something that didn't want me there. The pine needles underfoot were thick and muffled every step. As I neared the area where I'd seen the light, I heard a voice. Faint. Male. Whispering. I stopped. It was coming from behind a tree just ahead. I whispered, hello. No reply. But the whispering continued. I stepped closer and shined the flashlight toward the sound. No one there. Only a radio propped against a tree trunk, playing a looped voice message. Station 8 is not recognized. Repeat, Station 8 is not recognized. Then something cracked behind me. I spun around, light shaking in my hands, and saw a man standing about 15 feet away. He was wearing an old ranger uniform, but everything about him looked off. The badge was scratched out. His belt had no gear. His boots were mismatched, one black, one brown. And his eyes didn't blink. Sir? I asked, my voice cracking. He didn't answer. Just stared at me like I was something he didn't quite understand. Then, with jerky, unnatural movements, he lifted his arm and pointed toward the station. No one leaves after dark, he said flatly. I turned and ran. I didn't care what I tripped over. I bolted straight back to my truck, heart hammering, lungs freezing in the cold. As I reached the clearing, I saw lights on inside the ranger station now. The same porch light that had been flickering was glowing steady. And now, silhouettes moved behind the windows. 2, maybe 3, just standing there, watching. I jumped into my cab, started the engine with a shaking hand, and reversed straight through the underbrush to get out of there. I didn't follow the road. I just drove through the damn forest until I found pavement. The worst part? When I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw someone standing in the middle of the road behind me. Same ranger uniform. Just watching. No headlights reflected in his eyes. No movement. Just stillness. I didn't stop until I hit the main highway, shaking, adrenaline still boiling in my veins. When I finally got service, I called my dispatcher. I told him I'd gotten lost and asked if he had any record of a Station 8. He paused for a long time before saying, no. Station numbers skip from 7 to 9 in that region. Always have. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I reported what I'd seen to Forest Services. A woman at the desk pulled up a file, frowned, then walked into the back and brought out a dusty binder. Inside was a black and white photo of the exact same building I'd seen. Ranger station, same shape, same porch light, same color trim. I pointed and said, that's it. That's the one. She nodded. That used to be Station 8. It was decommissioned in 1998 after a series of incidents. Rangers were reporting sightings. Disappearances. Someone even claimed the forest around it moved. I asked what she meant. She just shook her head and said, the structure's not there anymore. Burned down in 2001. Lightning strike. We closed off the road years ago. I told her I was just there last night. She didn't argue. She just said, then you need to forget it. And maybe I should have. But 2 weeks later, I got an unmarked envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a single item, a Forest Service badge. One that looked worn, scraped across the middle, like someone had tried to scratch the name off. I don't do that route anymore. Hell, I don't even drive nights unless I have to. Because I don't know what I saw in those woods. But someone or something wearing that uniform saw me. And I get the feeling it still is.